Minnesota, Baton Rouge, Baltimore, Ferguson. We can't run from the issue of race. Dallas, there's a lot going on around topics of race and racism and the challenges that we're facing. And so it's natural, it's necessary for us to talk about race and racism and diversity and inclusion at the Sport Exchange Conference.
And I want to challenge you today to look into the eyes of your institutions. I want to challenge you today to ask some tough questions of the people that are around you. I want to challenge you today to engage in a journey towards free search, towards freaks, towards leadership, because our nation, the nations internationally, they need us.
I believe leaders and administrators in sport and universities, corporations need spaces where they can have honest conversations and ask critical questions about topics like race, about racism.
I don't do what I just call, what some of you may call just research. I call the work that I do me-search. I want to invite you to maybe do a bit of that with me today, because I believe that we lead and we engage from a place of our own positionality, but many of us have been conditioned to think that the answers to our problems lie solely outside of ourselves.
To have the opportunity to activate, the work that we did in interviewing 52 black male student athletes, and to share models and possibilities around that work and the voices that are challenging us to recognize that we have to shift some things, that there's some infrastructure that's needed to better support our men and our women, is a wonderful opportunity to be able to dialogue with leaders across this nation at this time to talk about sport, but also to talk about life is exactly why I chose to share this work at the Sport Exchange Conference.
And one of the things that I found in particular as it relates to how black males, and I believe it transcends even to others of various identities, is that we form our identities based on 4 particular variables. One is expectations, positive or negative, okay? Experiences or experimentation, positive or negative. Okay? So the opportunity to positively experiment has a powerful impact on your identity. Exposure, positive or negative, what one is exposed to, okay? So if you're a student athlete, but you've never had anyone in your family who's gone to college before, or you have no idea what your major should be or how it connects to your passions, perhaps you haven't been exposed to some of the things that others have been, where they sort of know, well, dad worked in this place and he majored in this and he transitioned to this, right? So exposure is powerful. And in the study, that for example, looked like the reality that many of the student athletes had no idea what was necessary to be an academic All-American.
I was hoping to inspire, hoping to encourage, to let leaders know that there is hope, that there are models that we've created and models that perhaps exist that can be used to shift how we think about leadership, how we think about student athletes, how we think about professional athletes, and the support and infrastructure that we can actually develop and innovate with to be able to transform and to inspire.
When we think about all the systems that we have in our country, the penal system, the educational system, the housing markets, all of these systems that we have, these systems were created when racism was overt. These systems were created when it wasn't the expectation or the thought was that people of color were not just, they were less than human. What we're dealing with now in our society is not about just individual people. It's about systems that have been set up to divide us. And a lot of times we're not comfortable having those conversations, and it impacts what we do as educators and leaders and folks working with student athletes.
With everything that took place last week in Dallas, in Minnesota, in Baton Rouge, and the things that have been taking place nationally and even internationally, what makes the speech relevant is the timing of it. But also, I believe I have a special sort of space or role in these conversations as a black man who was born and raised in Bermuda, but also has family connections to St. Louis. I'm sharing these ideas with a diasporic or international context of the realities that are not just happening here, but are happening around the world.
I'll share with you, I was troubled, really, if I'm honest, with the reality that I sat down with 7 black male student athletes before one described a healthy relationship with both his biological mother and biological father. And I'm not saying that to disparage the black family. I'm saying that those realities are contextual and there are reasons for those dynamics. But if you don't know that, if we don't know that with folks who are working, whether it be a professional sport, collegiate athletics, high school athletics, if we don't know the context of where people are coming from, the brokenness that they bring, then we can't really effectively lead them.
I close by sharing the the story of my grandfather, a man who was a brilliant carpenter. But there was a time in his life where he didn't feel satisfied with the outcomes of his journey because he wasn't allowed to get access to the only black academic high school at the time because he was deemed illegitimate.
My grandfather was a master carpenter. His name was Henry Thomas. And he lived across the garden from me. And I couldn't quite understand why this brilliant man, as I saw him, a carpenter, was unwilling to share his carpentry skills with me. I always wanted to be a little handy. He shared with me that he had taken an admissions exam. He was in elementary school required to take an admissions exam, and he said he got the highest score, the second highest score on the test. But he was not allowed to attend the only black academic school because he was deemed illegitimate. His parents weren't married when he was born, and so based on the policies, the structures, the institutions, he couldn't go to this particular school, and he was bitter because of it. Angry, frustrated, because what I saw as great carpentry work, he saw as a reminder of the visions and dreams that he could not pursue. Access. I thought, wow, access, leaders, providing access. He had never been able to connect with anybody to have that conversation. I was blessed to be able to have that conversation to the extent that he shared one more thing with me as I asked him a question. His eyes looked like that. Jaundice was setting in. And he said to me, listen, you know, some of those conversations that you have and things are not looking good. And I said, Papa, I said, what's up with your eyes, man? I said, your eyes are yellow, the banana yellow. What's going on? And he said, what are you talking about? What do you see? I said, your eyes, they look like these chairs. They look like they're yellow. Have you not seen them? And this is what he said to me, and I want to leave you with this. He said, I haven't looked in my eyes in years. And that blew me away. You know why? Because I began to ask this question: how is it that you could shave every single day? How is it you could wash your face and brush your teeth, but never look into your eyes? And I have a sneaky suspicion that some of us in this room, we're trying to lead people on a journey that we are not quite ready for because we haven't looked into our own eyes.
I thought that today's presentation was just one of the greatest talks, presentations, speeches, clinic messages that I've heard in my 48 years as a coach. I sat in the back of the room where I was assigned to sit for this, and that gave me opportunity to watch the room wake up to Ty as he moved from phase to phase through the talk. And by the end of the presentation, over the last 15 minutes, you had an entire room full of people in silence, mesmerized, just totally enthralled with the power of the message that was being delivered and with their recognition that they possibly were contributors to the problem.
My favorite part of Dr. Douglas's talk today was his ability to challenge us as administrators to go deeper. So often we get challenged to continue to do good work or continue to put on great programs, but he really pushed us to get to know our student athletes deeper, who they are, where they're from, what they're about, what their experiences are, so that we might be able to service them in a much greater level. We get these talks all the time, but very rarely do we get tangible tools on how we can put our feet to the ground and have a greater impact.
It was so inspirational, and really, as a University of Missouri graduate, I felt inspired to go and change the world. And as Dr. Rick McGuire said later on, that if you change your world, you can help change the rest of the world.
It was amazing, informative, it was very impactful, and I look forward to the next steps as he carries out his me search, research, we search into free search.